You're listening to the Certified Personal Trainer Podcast, a show by personal trainers for personal trainers. It's time to become a better trainer, get more clients, and change more lives.
Thanks for coming today. We're going to be talking about corrective exercise. I'm super excited to nerd out with everyone. All right, y'all, let's get started. If you guys have any questions at any point today, please feel free to hop them in the chat. I know there's a Q&A button as well, I believe. And we will answer it as we go on or at the end of today's presentation. So today we're going to talk about corrective exercise. If you guys are new to the training world, you might not be too familiar with the concept. Totally okay. I remember when I got certified, a lot of people at the gym I worked at were super, super big on corrective exercise. And I was like, what is that? Right? So if you do not know what that is, we're going to figure it out today. And if you do know what it is, we're going to take a deeper dive, and it may be a good refresher for you all today. Why do we utilize them, right? Why do we use corrective exercise? What is it good for? We're going to take a deeper look into that. How to properly assess and utilize different types. Today's presentation won't be on like every single one because there's hundreds, but we will point out a couple common themes that we see, and we'll go deeper into that, and then we will give you an example of the implementation of a corrective exercise for an injury that's super common in the training world, super common in general, for athletes in general. So we'll take a deeper look into that. A lot of coaches roll their eyes because a lot of coaches believe that corrective exercise is overused and that these types of things should be dealt with on the PT side of things or within a doctor's office or things like that. I want to start today's presentation by letting you all know I am not a doctor. Absolutely not. Okay. However, I have taken a lot of time in the last 5 to 6 years of my career, and I've really, really come to learn a lot about the power and the usefulness of corrective exercise. So while I'm not here telling you what to prescribe your clients, I will never be that person that tells you what to do and prescribing things. These are suggestions, these are tools, and these are tips that I want to let you all in on. Personally speaking, I have had a lot of injuries. I don't know if any of you know this. Outside of the personal training industry, I am an actor and I am a dancer. That's the biggest type of performance art I do. I'm a dancer. So I'm sure you all know dancers comes with a lot of injury, right? So I have had extreme lower back injuries. I had a rotator cuff tear last summer, which my team at Fitness Mentors knows, and I've dealt with my fair share, as I'm sure everyone here has. And through the power of corrective exercise, I completely fixed my L4 and basically a crack in my spine. Now it's still there. I didn't heal it completely, but with the use of movements and rehabilitation and corrective exercise, I have made myself able to properly deadlift and do these things that I never, ever dreamt I would ever be able to do again after my injury. So let's dive in. What is corrective exercise, y'all? They are techniques used by health and fitness professionals to address and fix movement compensations and imbalances. The goal of these movements is to help clients move and feel better, both during a workout and in everyday life. So a lot of times I think there's a misconception. People just think, oh, well, I had a broken leg 5 years ago, therefore that's what we need to do corrective exercise on, right? Corrective exercise isn't just for injuries, right? An example of this is if I have a client who works at a desk for 12 hours a day, hunched over, that right there, it's not an injury, but his posterior chain is probably really, really weak because he's hunched over all day. So we can use corrective exercise to fix that, right? So these are techniques. These are ways of making our clients feel better and move better. It's not always injury. Now, sometimes it is. And with that, I say that is when you want to make sure that your client is cleared to work out, right? So if it is a past rotator cuff, if it's something like that, you absolutely want to just get that cleared before you start prescribing some corrective exercises or foam rolling or rehab movements for that client. Right here.
Really quick, Sam.
I'm sorry. Oh, of course.
I just love what you just said, because also what I've learned, because I think in like the certification process, you do learn a lot about like corrective movements and stuff, but I think we don't necessarily learn the ways in which we can use it to our advantage as trainers. So often you hear people talk about corrective movements as rehabilitation and rehab exercises, but I'm not sure if many of you know this term, but we could also look at them as prehabilitation, so prehab, right?
Mm-hmm.
And the goal of that is to avoid injury. So this is before any injury actually occurs, which is probably best, right? Let's not wait to get hurt before we start doing these exercises, not only for ourselves, but our clients, right? So the goal is to avoid injury by either compensating for whether it be a repetitive movement or stress from regular training, or even just daily movement patterns. It doesn't have to be someone who is in the gym 6 out of the 7 days a week, right? Every day we're doing repetitive movements, whether it be someone working an office job that's sitting constantly. Those hip flexors are tight, right? So corrective exercise is not only correcting injuries, but we're just being preventative as well, and just compensating for any repetitive movement patterns, or just daily movement patterns from either training or just your normal life. So that's something else to consider. I think that's something I've learned that at first no one really told me about, that I'd love to share. So think about that.
Absolutely. I love it. I love it. And I see here, we already have some stuff in the chat, so we can go ahead and just kind of start off with that. Megan, question about hip flexors. I have a tight right side only hip flexor. What are the best exercises and or stretches I can do to correct this? I also love to run, but only a few miles once or twice a week. I love HIIT training as well. So the thing about hip flexors, I'm not sure if you know what's going on there. Most the common things that I see is either tendonitis in the hip flexors, or if you had a hip injury. I'm not sure if you did, but we see a tight psoas. For those not familiar, that's one of the prime movers in the hip. It is a wonderful mover, but it is often messed with, and it really affects pain into our lower spine and also underneath that pelvic bone, and into the pelvis, which can be super, super not fun. There's a couple things I always suggest. I know everyone sees people doing it like on the bike path before they go for runs, so it's probably like overused. Anything where we're rolling that hip joint, so like hip lifts, rolling in and out. If you're laying on your back and you're moving side to side, we should do a webinar where I'm like up and like, actually performing all this. So any circular motion for the hips to warm them up, it's going to be your best friend. You'll hear me say this a lot today: foam roll the front and the anterior and posterior chain all around those hip joints and the sockets and everything. Foam roll. And when people say to foam roll for 5 minutes, no, foam roll for 10 minutes. You should look at foam rolling the same way you look at ab work, right? People always are like, I foam rolled. I'm like, right. For how long? Right. And did you get in there? Foam rolling should not hurt, but it should cause some nice pressure. Okay. So definitely foam roll. And then from there, something that I'm not sure of how advanced of type of rehab you're wanting, Megan, something that I've seen work really nicely for tight psoases and all of that. If you kind of make yourself ready for, if you prepare yourself for a reverse lunge, instead of going up and down, if you go all the way down into that reverse lunge and then you let your knee tap on the floor, and then you stretch into that hip, repeat that movement a couple of times before any run that you might go on, or any movement pattern in general. You're going to see some good, you're lubing up you're lubing up the joints, and that will absolutely help you. And that's a nice one because it is pretty advanced, right? It's not, foam rolling is pretty, it's not that advanced to know how to do it. The lunge pattern where you let your knee drop to the floor and then you stretch in, it almost looks like you're preparing for like a Bulgarian split squat almost, but with your assisted. Try things out like that. Like I said, I don't want to prescribe every single one of you all these different movements because I have never seen any of you move before, but that would be my advice. I also said someone asked about spinal fusion. Okay, how can I assist? Yeah. So spinal fusion, that's a difficult one. Anything with spinal fusion, this is my personal opinion. Depending on when she got it, I would avoid deadlifting and heavy squats for a while, but focusing on anything to tighten up that pelvic floor, hip bridges, things like that are going to help with any pain involving that. I'm a big fan of any glute or hip bridge, and I'm a huge fan of any pelvic floor work. She is a female. I have my post and prenatal certifications, and so I'm very biased towards how powerful our pelvis is. So absolutely work on some bridges and glute bridges and all of that. And either of you who asked those questions, if you guys want to email me after and we can talk more about this, I would love to nerd out about it. And then Megan, thank you of course, that's why I'm here. All right.
As we transition, Sam, though, something that came to my mind too,
Yeah.
even talking to Megan, not only as like stretching, because I love running. I'm a runner. I grew up running track and cross country. Not only is it important to like lengthen anything that's tight, right? But we also want to strengthen any adjacent muscle. So like specifically for your hips, right? Work on your glutes on those like rehab days where you're not going on your long runs or something and you're just in the gym, maybe doing some strength. Work on your glutes. Oh my goodness, it's so important. So that's something to consider, but that comes back to what we're talking about today, corrective exercises and why we use them. So yeah, let's keep going.
Absolutely, guys. Let's do it. All right. So the value of corrective exercise. So here are some 3 points I put together. There's obviously so much value in all this, but this is kind of the top 3 for me. So what are they doing? They are restoring and they are encouraging the proper movement pattern. Okay. So let's say a movement pattern. Let's use the example that I used at the top of this. I have a male client. He works a 10-hour desk job all day and he's hunched over his computer. Okay. So like I said, he may not have an injury, but his muscle memory, his body has allowed himself to have a weakened upper posterior chain, right? The traps and all up here, that the movement pattern that should be occurring, which is having a upright posture, is now weak and it needs to be restored. Okay. So we can use corrective exercise to almost reteach the muscles how to learn these certain movements again. These can be really minuscule, tiny movements. I mean, I'm working with a client right now who, when he squats, right before he squats, the second before he drops his, or he bends the knee, right before his right foot turns out a little bit, right? And that's just a movement that his body and it's a neurological thing, right? Your body learns where your body feels most comfortable. Therefore, they get into these habits and your body gets used to that and adjusts to it and feels good. Therefore, it gets used to all that and does those movements. We want to make sure and ensure that the body is doing the proper movements to prevent injury, right? So we want to restore and encourage the proper movements for longevity in the muscle groups and in these movements. Another reason, prepping for higher intensity movements. Okay. Perfect example of this is if you have a pretty athletic client, he's let's say a high school football player, and you're having him squat, 300 pounds today. Perfect exercise up front is an air squat, right? Because you're preparing these muscle groups and the joints for a higher intensity version of a squat. So we can use them to fix, but we can also use them to prepare. And then lastly, muscle mass. So it's some people disagree with this, some people believe it. We want to provide this neurological response in the beginning that these muscles are going to be utilized throughout today's workout or today's program that we're about to do. And with that, you're going to see the muscles working better, and you're going to see them being restored more correctly, and you're going to see them recover better, right? So by preparing these certain muscle groups, you're going to see results, and you're going to see movements and the quality of that muscle only increase over time. So those are just a couple points. Coaches, do you guys have anything you want to add in, or do you have any other comments or other values that you see in corrective exercise?
I'll briefly hop in. Not much. You did a beautiful job, but I think something to consider as we're just starting this conversation about corrective exercise is considering health and exercise history of a client. That's so crucial, so important. Whether it be someone who has been a lifetime mover or an athlete, someone who exercises regularly, or if they just are coming to you with a new injury, or they're a novice learner, right? You need to consider their health history, exercise history. That's also important. And something else to consider too, I know this may jump a little bit to a different topic in terms of like working with older adults, but specifically, I feel like when you're working with a lot of older clients, whether it be senior fitness, right? You might tap into a lot of corrective movements because of either muscle imbalances, weaknesses, right? But just remember that older doesn't mean weaker. Or even if someone has like a slight injury or imbalance, it doesn't mean weaker. So we need to be able to like just recognize that even we're working with older clients, specifically when it comes to corrective movement, they could be just as physically fit as someone who's half their age, right? So that's where also an assessment is so important. We just spoke about that, I think 2 weeks ago or a month ago, right? So check out that webinar if that's something you are interested in learning more about. But those assessments are important for knowing what kind of corrective exercises to prescribe, because you need to find out everything involving, like I mentioned, history, previous injuries. So any assessment to get a deeper look into alignment issues, range of movement issues, strength issues, that's all so important. So before you even think about corrective exercises, recognize how important it is to learn as much as you can about your clients through assessments, through learning their health history and exercise history. So something to consider.
Absolutely.
I just have a small piece, and I know Sam, we wanted to touch on corrective exercise and its the power of it, but I want to harken back to why it's good to know these things, as it always leads back to what we're ultimately trying to do in our program design for our clients, and when we meet potential clients and we're trying to sell to them. So like Miguel was saying and Sam was saying, a lot of these corrective issues are brought about by poor lifestyle habits, poor posture, poor mechanics. So, you're, like I've shared in the past, you're at the supermarket, you're at the movie theater, you're at a concert, you're walking around the gym, and you notice someone with rounded shoulders, forward head position, curve. You'll notice symptoms of conditions that like upper cross syndrome, or hip issues, or knee issues, or the way people, their cadence and their walk. These are ways to assess just visually ahead of time, before you even get a chance to meet these potential clients, ways you can already help them, and ways that corrective exercise is going to be beneficial, and ways you've already helped others. And in that ability can cross over to really convince others that you're the right trainer for them. So that's why the value of corrective exercise is so powerful, and why we're focusing on that today.
Absolutely. Yeah. Yeah. And it's just it really is, like I said, and I want to harp on this. They can assist in injury reduction, but that's not the only reason why they're there. And what Pat just said about, poor lifestyle choices, or even, most of the time it's imbalances that these clients don't even know they have, right? You're seeing them from your assessment that you're giving them, and then you're letting them know that that is not the way that movement is supposed to happen, or something's a little bit off, or the right tricep is working harder than the left, right? Like, these are things that clients don't necessarily see, which why would they, right? But I completely agree. It's such a great point, Pat. Like, this, a lot of times it is going to be because of things that are just happening throughout these people's daily life that they don't know. But at the end of the day, think about it this way: by researching into these corrective exercises for each client, right? Because everyone's very different. It's going to help you and them in the long run, because you're not going to be dealing with chronic injury or anything like that down the road, because you will have already kind of worked around those potential injuries, or you will have at least attempted to in the safest manner. But yeah, awesome. Great points. Let's keep moving. All right. So when should we utilize this? So I know I said this at the top. If someone is in excruciating pain doing any movement, absolutely stop. That's just it. Stop. I don't know if anyone here is a fan of FMS. I'm a big fan of it. I know some people at Fitness Mentors love it. Others just don't utilize it. I love it. It's a functional movement screen. It's a way to screen our clients. The reason I like it is because one of the rules is if your client has any pain doing a certain movement, they get a 0 right away. They should not be doing that movement, right? So before I even touch on this slide, I just want to put that out there. If there's any pain with a movement, don't perform it, and refer them out. Have them go see someone before you even treat or before you even think about a corrective exercise to help that movement pattern. They need to see someone if it's painful. So implementing proper corrective exercise for the task at hand requires your eye, so a coach's eye, of understanding how they move and how this certain athlete functions, right? And you also want to know everything and anything about your client, which is what Miguel just said about how important this assessment is. This is why. This right here is why, right? Because not only do their lifestyle choices and all of that affect their mental well-being and their time commitment to you, but you want to know everything about them so that you understand why they might be moving a certain way, or why they might be standing a certain way, or why they might be sinking into their right hip and have their arms crossed when they're talking to you instead of perfect posture, right? You want to know this stuff about your client so that when you're selecting and looking into these corrective exercises for each client, you're good to go. You're prepared. So most movements do not require a significant load. Therefore, we commonly see these movements in warm-ups of programs. Yes. So in terms of literally when should we utilize this? And I want to be careful with this because every coach has their different opinion on this. I personally am not shy to say what I believe is, in my opinion, when to use corrective exercise, but I also would argue that it really depends on my client. So most commonly, I would say 80% of the time, we see it at the top of the workout, especially if it comes to recovering an injury. If a client's been working with an injury for a while, they're cleared to work out with you, but they're recovering. Or if it's that they pretty much have nothing really to correct, more so you're utilizing corrective exercise to prepare them for more load, right? That would be at the top of the workout, naturally. Okay. Some coaches will, and this is very advanced, some coaches will perform corrective exercise in between sets. Right now I'm working with another client. He happens to be my husband, and he's an extreme athlete. He is a very, very, very athletic dude. We have him squatting pretty heavy And then in the middle or in between each set, we have him doing banded adductors because he's having some ankle mobility stuff going on. Okay. So that's a corrective exercise that I've implemented into his program in between his sets for the squat. Very advanced. Do not feel like you should be doing that. If you're not, it's totally fine, but that is something to think about. And I would love to touch on that more if you guys have any questions at the end about that, if that speaks to a certain client that you have right now. And then of course, sometimes if we believe that a corrective exercise might detract from a workout, that's when we want to put it at the end. Okay. So let's say anyone's dealing, this where my brain goes to is some of my prenatal clients who are feeling a little bit weak in certain areas if they're pretty far into their term. I don't want to make them so tired and so worn out that by the time that they're warm and ready to go, they can't perform the way I need them to, or the way that I want their body to, right? So sometimes if there's something that we're working on, or perhaps it's kind of like the muscle group we didn't work on that day, and I just want to take 10 to 15 minutes outside of that and kind of work on that at the end, that's where it would be proper. As I said, it's going to really depend on your clients, y'all. But this is a key moment for me to say your fitness mentors team is always here. So if you have your own business or you're working at a gym, reach out to us. We can absolutely help you. I love nerding out on all this stuff and I love programming. So if you have questions like, hey, I have this client, they broke their femur 5 years ago, but now they're super advanced and they're squatting really heavy. When should I do blah, blah, blah with them? I would love that email. I'm going to respond very happy. So reach out. Coaches, do you guys have anything to add?
That was a really great point, because you're right. I think a question even I myself will ask too, it's like, well, when should I implement a corrective exercise or a prehab exercise? Before our workout, after our workout, between sets? And I think your example speaks kind of to what I follow. If someone is performing really high and they're an athlete like your husband, right? It's probably okay to incorporate some of these exercises between sets. The only thing to be mindful of is whether or not we're actually dealing with an injury, because we don't want to exhaust this person and in turn hurt them during their normal sets, right?
Right.
Because that's how we'll quickly exhaust someone, especially if you're working with, this is where you need to know someone's health history and exercise history. If you're working with someone who has a really bad injury, or the injury is fairly new, or they're just a novice trainer, it's probably not best to build in some of these exercises in between sets or reps. So yeah, those are things to be mindful of. Not only what exercise are we doing and why we're doing them, but when are we doing them?
Right. Absolutely. Thank you, Miguel.
So one last thing for me, since a lot of times, as we've said, the purpose of the corrective exercise, is to correct poor movement patterns, which is the result of, improper mechanics or lifestyle, and or increased range of motion, like when we were talking with Megan with hip flexors, whether we do the pigeon pose, a psoas hold, kneeling hip flexor stretch. So I personally like doing them, like Sam said, whether it's in through the workout, but I like beginning with them because of the fact that we are trying to correct. The purpose is to correct improper movement patterns. So, a lot of times in that teaching moment, it's good to lead with that. And also as we're using a lot of these different things, for like Sam was mentioning with the lunge, for the hip flexors, doing a lot of dynamic movements that can also be used as warm-ups in the teaching. You can use it as a twofold method with those corrective exercise to help to teach and educate on proper corrective movement patterns, and to help with proper flexibility at the same time before you get into the actual movements themselves.
Absolutely. Thanks, Pat. Absolutely. Great point. All right, y'all. Let's keep moving. One last, I'll actually just say this, guys. It depends on if you're working within a gym, this might not be a thing, but depending on where your client's at and what your client's needing, I also have seen people do 30-minute sessions, right? So a complete different session or a complete different, time where they take a good amount of time to perform corrective exercise. So if you work, I know we actually have a trainer who's certified through Fitness Mentors. He works for like a high school, I believe it's a baseball team. He does a lot of sessions like that, right? So he's taking 30 to 45 minutes with a guy or one of his baseball players, and he's performing a bunch of different corrective exercises and rehab work and foam rolling and whatever XYZ on these students. So that is another time and place that you could kind of implement into their program. But like I said, if you work at a gym, that's probably not going to be a thing, but I just wanted to put it out there. Awesome. So examples. So scenarios that call for corrective exercise. So I know we've kind of touched on this, but I kind of wanted to place this here. And then on the next slide, we'll see an example. So if certain muscle groups are underactive, right? So Miguel, if you don't mind popping over to the next slide. So with this, we would want to utilize targeted resistance movements. Okay. So right here for this scenario, we are looking at a underactive rotator impingement. Okay. So let's say this client 2 years ago had an impingement of the rotator cuff. They're cleared by their doctor. They're good to go. But they still feel a little bit nervous, which is something you will always find with these clients, is that when they had an injury, they're very cautious and almost overly cautious in a way because they're nervous to use these certain muscle groups, right? Which is totally understandable. So let's say they're a bit nervous to do any overhead press, to do anything like a fly, or even a chest press, right? Because we obviously utilize those muscles in a chest press as well. Okay. So let's say that's the scenario for this client. So something that we would want to perhaps utilize is a reverse fly with a band. Why? Okay. So there's some resistance. We're not adding load. It's not a huge load, but we are utilizing the posterior chain, the traps. We're utilizing triceps when we do this, and we are working in and around that rotator cuff in that area with some form of resistance, which in this case is a band. Okay. Another scenario, so the muscles are shortened and we want them to lengthen. Okay. So let's say that with this impingement also came a weakening of the muscles, right? So they became shortened, right? Like this. I don't know if you guys are familiar, but if you have your arms like this, I will act this out, and you put the door right here and you're stretching, right? And then you can also do it the opposite way. This is a good stretch, right? So if we want to lengthen the muscles, usually stretching is what we would want to implement here. Okay. Now, perhaps my favorite, as I warned you all before, I am a big foam roller girl. So if the muscles are understimulated or underactivated, we would want to do something to the effect of foam rolling. Now, before anyone hops in the chat and yells at me, some people are taught that if there is injury or if there is sensitivity, to not foam roll on that area. The only time I ever believe that is the case personally is if it is a direct injury or your IT band. I do not believe in foam rolling the IT band. That is my personal experience and preference. If you guys disagree, totally fine, right? Now, if someone's blatantly saying it hurts, what do? You stop, right? However, foam rolling, even if it's lightly foam rolling, if you are foam rolling onto that person, it will help bring heat to that area in the body. That is simply what it does. That is what foam rolling is. It's bringing heat. It's starting to activate and stimulate these muscles. I don't love the word activated here. I don't know why I wrote that. Let's work on the word stimulated. It will start stimulating the area around the rotator cuff where the impingement happened, or wherever that injury is. Coaches, do you guys want to add in on anything here? There's obviously other scenarios, but this right here is, I would say, a pretty basic example that I thought was pretty clear. And if anyone is unfamiliar with any of these movements that I've said in red, let me know.
No, I think just off of your point too with foam rolling, I've learned from myself, but with other people too. Sometimes a lot of runners who are foam rolling around their hips, which we spoke about earlier, if your body is excessively tight, foam rolling can be painful, which if it's too painful, as Sam said, stop, because you will actually cause the opposite of what you want to happen, right? So for runners with like sensitive areas like that, be mindful of that. That doesn't mean I don't think, I love foam rolling as well, Sam. Don't put the foam roller away. That just means maybe take your time when foam rolling. Maybe don't, like, specifically if you're, I don't know, working on your calves too, like don't put all your body weight on either, right? Just like reduce your time with the foam roller, practice smaller sessions, and build up your tolerance. But yeah, if there's any pain in foam rolling, stop. But yeah.
Yeah, I definitely, this might be a little bit hard ass of me, but I personally believe people, unless it was an injury or a previous injury, obviously if there's pain, stop. But sometimes people mistake soreness or things of that nature for pain. Simply what I do, I ask my clients to go walk on the treadmill for like 5 to 10 minutes. If they're still in excruciating pain and they're that sore, they shouldn't be working out. But if their body is feeling warm and they're like, oh, you know what? Yeah, I'm just really sore. That's a good feeler. Having your client go on the bike for 5 minutes, right? Doing something to like heat up the body. There have been times before where I'm like, I absolutely cannot even think about laying on a foam roller. I'm so sore, right? And with that, I would prescribe rest. Okay. But that's where I would say a good trainer client kind of communication skill here is say, are you sore? Are you in pain? Right? There's a difference. And then help them understand that. Like I said at the top of this today, a lot of these clients that we're working with, they don't understand any of this. That's why they hired you. So you have to be cognizant of that. And you have to be able to kind of help put all of this stuff in layman's terms to them, right? So help them understand what soreness is versus pain. Help them understand that perhaps if you just go warm up the body a little bit, foam rolling might not be this painful thing. Is it this painful thing, or does it just feel a little bit just uncomfortable, right? And help your clients understand all of these cues so that as you keep going with your sessions with your clients, there's a clear the communication is just more clear with all of this verbiage that we use. But yeah, awesome. Pat, did you have anything you wanted to add, or should we keep going?
Oh, you can keep going. I think you and Miguel touched upon that. There's so many, like you've said before, Sam, you can geek out on so much of this because this is just a small sampling. Get into the full depth of the detail would require way more time.
Oh yeah. I mean, we can have a month-long webinar. 1 month. Awesome. So let's go over some key perspectives and then we'll get into questions and we can chat a little bit about some resources we have here at Fitness Mentors for you all if you want to dive deeper. So be sure to never compromise performance training programs in order to create exclusive corrective exercise programs. Rather, they should use assessment tools to guide their provided movements that their athletes can safely execute. Okay. So, and this is also, I think we touched on this a little bit. You don't want your corrective exercises to be making your clients like break out into sweat and like just they're absolutely not able to continue with your session because you've just completely worked them, right? You want these to be tools to help your clients execute loaded movements of that same nature, or you want them to help relearn patterns, right? Or prepare. Okay. In order to reduce injuries, athletes must be able to move effectively and train hard, building a solid anatomical foundation. Corrective exercise serves as a supplementary tool to assist with dysfunctional movement and ensures we address issues before they get out of hand. If you're going to take one thing out of today's webinar, that second point is exactly it, right? A solid anatomical foundation. That is the goal. Okay. I would I think it's safe to say, I do not know a statistic on this, so I'm not going to put a number to it. Rarely anyone has a perfect anatomical foundation. I don't know if anyone does, right? But obviously, as personal trainers, as movers, as athletes, that's the goal. We have goals within these programs. We want to run a marathon. We want to lose 15 pounds. We want to be able to take up our grandkids up the stairs when we're 80. Whatever these goals are, that starts with being anatomically fit and fundamentally good in that department, right? So that is the goal. And so corrective exercise can help us get closer to that goal. I don't think any of our clients are ever going to be perfect movers. I'm sure as hell no, I'm not. But the goal is to move towards that, right? Last point, develop your own personal form to insert these into each individual client's program. Read that again, each individual client's program. I know we say at Fitness Mentors every webinar that every client is different. It is true. More so, every client's corrective exercise protocol is extremely different. You're going to see similar movements being utilized, right, for different types of injuries or different types of imbalances, right? But every client will have a very, very, very different formula being used. And it might be happening at very different times in their program, or their progression might look a lot different, or they might regress. How do you deal with that, right? There's all these scenarios that can be brought up when it comes to corrective exercise and rehabilitation. So be sure that you're taking a really, really deep look into each individual client. There are factors that will also, I know we've talked about a little bit today. There are so many factors that will cause imbalances, cause injury, cause discomfort. By talking to our clients, by having a good communication, and by being open and honest with each other and really establishing this partnership, more will come out as you go, right? And as you program, and you'll be able to also see how your clients move, right? And you're going to be able to see, oh, when you squat down, your right hip is dropping a little bit more than your left. Do you sit all day at work, right? You're going to be able to have conversations about this stuff that will really, really help you down the road program corrective exercise. There's no correct way to do it for each client. There's no one size fits all for this. It is simply a supplementary tool to assist with any dysfunctional movements happening or any previous injury.
Just in terms of implementing corrective exercise into a program, like we mentioned earlier, many clients might not recognize that they have any imbalances, or honestly, even if it's not a drastic issue that they're having, but just like, why is this important? Just like you would with anything else in someone's program, set goals. We do that with all our clients. So this shouldn't be a question, right? Like, it's central to restoring confidence and maintaining that confidence and independence for our clients, whether it be they're coming off of an injury or not. Like we said, we use these for all different reasons, but make sure that we're setting goals. And then my only other thing is, in terms of implementing them, many restorative and corrective exercises are really simple, actually. And Sam touched on it before. More often than not, we're not even adding any load or extra weight. A lot of it is either with bands or just body weight. Mm-hmm. So in terms of directing and cueing, cueing is so important in general, but in terms of corrective exercises, never assume that someone just understands what they're doing, why they're doing. So cueing can be tough, but go back to the basics and never assume that someone understands something that might be simple to you or maybe another client. You might have two clients with similar problems. One might get it and understand it and it might be working. It might not for the other. So just be mindful of that. Something that we don't think about often is how we're communicating and cueing these clients, specifically when it comes to corrective movements, because we don't want to further impede on someone reaching a goal or preventing an injury or them injuring themselves further. We don't want to do that. So make sure that you go back to the basics, understand what you're doing, and cue properly. That is something so important when it comes to pain management and corrective movement. So just think about that. But thank you so much, Coach Sam. Thanks for leading that. I certainly learned a lot. I hope everyone did. It's a great conversation, something we don't often dive into. So that was really helpful.
Absolutely, guys. All right. Well, I hope everyone has such a wonderful weekend. And we will be here. Let us know if we can help you guys in any way. Your Fitness Mentors team is always here. And we will see you all in 2 weeks.
As always, thanks for listening to the Certified Personal Trainer Podcast. You can learn more about Fitness Mentors at fitnessmentors.com. Be sure to share this podcast on social media. And remember, we are here to help you succeed.